after a lot of discussion surrounding what is this going to do at the box office, initially started projected it between 130 to 150 million dollar opening. That slowly went down and down and down. Between at the end, it was between 110 million and 130 million dollars. Well, the final number landed right in there. Yesterday, we got word at $114 million domestic debut. Today, it has been slightly updated after those final Sunday numbers came in, and it's sitting at $118 million domestically opening weekend. To put that in perspective, the second Guardians of the Galaxy, released back in 2017, made $146 million in its opening weekend. And here we are 6 years later, significantly off that number for Guardians 3, behind Thor Love and Thunder, behind Wakanda Forever, behind everything with the exception of Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, which was a complete and total flop at the box office. Now, there is some positive news about Guardians, and that's that it actually got a China release. Unlike Thor Love and Thunder, which opened, again, to $302 million globally, this movie, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, opens to around $285 million. That's with almost $30 million from China. So Guardians certainly has a long...
in China. And it did well in China. It did well in China.
It really did.
That's a solid-ass number in China.
It's not necessarily comparable to maybe like what we were seeing just prior to COVID and all this bullshit, but that's a big number for the MCU right now. Now, it is kind of a fake big number. The idea of like having a big box office number in China, that's kind of, you can compare that to shaving your pubes to make your dick look bigger. And at the end of the day, it might look bigger, but it doesn't have that big of an effect because the studio only gets 20 to 25% of the money that comes from the Chinese box office. So if you make $100 million in a Chinese box office, you're only going to see 20 or $25 million of that at the end of the day. But it's definitely a better look for them. Because without that number, you're looking at a $255 million global opening compared to Thor Love and Thunder's $302 million.
Yes. And if we remember when Thor Love and Thunder opened at that number, a lot of people ran with the narrative that this is going to be a $1 billion movie easily after that opening. And Ryan was the main person that was saying, like, this isn't tracking like you guys are claiming it's tracking. And ultimately, look where it ended up. And I even predicted that this movie was going to make $1 billion, not because I didn't see Thor Love and Thunder. I had no interest in this movie, and thank God I didn't see it because I heard how unbelievably terrible it was. But I was just going on the fact of how Ragnarok performed, that you had the Guardians of the Galaxy in it, even if they were teased in it. And it just kind of had that Guardians of the Galaxy vibe to it. But this movie, from what everyone says, is one of the worst Marvel movies to date. And it clearly underperformed after that big opening weekend. Word of mouth was really bad for this movie. And that's where the problem with Guardians is, although it is in reverse. So Guardians is suffering because of films like Thor Love and Thunder and Eternals and Wakanda Forever and Ant-Man. But in reality, it is by far one of the better Marvel movies we've seen in a long time. I think it's the best Marvel movie since Infinity War. Yes, even better than No Way Home. I think Guardians 3 is excellent, and word of mouth is going to elevate this movie a little bit. I don't know if it carries it to $1 billion. I don't think it carries it to even 800 million.
Yeah, that's true. This is the number. It needs to. The reason Thor Love and Thunder is important when you're making these comparisons is because this number is probably the bare minimum for break even for Guardians 3. And honestly, it's probably way more. I think they're spending way more on this movie than even we think. Thor Love and Thunder had a marketing budget of $160 million. That's how much they spent on marketing for Thor Love and Thunder. Guardians 3 potentially is even higher with his Super Bowl commercial. And even, which was revealed today, they have a massive $90 million global promotional partner campaign. To put that in perspective, that's more than double the amount that they paid for these kind of like partner things with like McDonald's or whatever, these kind of brand things. That's more than double what they paid for the first two Guardians movies combined. They have gone all out with marketing for this movie. It could end up being somewhere around $200 million worth of print and ad campaigns, which if that's the case, that would bump up that break-even point to more like $800 million. So there's a lot of things that are yet to be determined, but this is the bare minimum that Guardians 3 needs to hit to even make the claim that it might break even. And if a lot of that number is coming from China, that could be a little bit of a false number as well. Because if it does, like I said, if it gets a bunch of money from China, it might not actually be getting that return that we
Profitable.
would expect if you factor that in.